alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a new guest to the show, an urban fantasy author, W L Hawkins. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleased to be here.
Well, great. Yeah, what sort of stuff do you write? And and is there a better address for you than WL? No, never mind that.
There is. There definitely is.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
Wendy.
Okay, that WL has more syllables than it looks like it would have, you know? So Wendy,
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's based on my actual name, which is Wendy Louise.
Ah, of course.
Right? So, yeah.
Easy to
So
write. Oh, sorry, go on.
What do I write?
Yeah, what sort of stuff do you write? Yeah.
Sure. I've been working on the Hollystone Mysteries for a few years, and I just finished book 4. So they are an urban fantasy series that involve murders and catching killers and thrillers. So what it is basically is it's a coven of witches that live in Vancouver that use their witchy powers, not the kind of blink and it's done stuff, but more ritualistic, calling down the gods kind of power to solve murders. And in the process, they meet characters that are fairies, vampires, gods, that kind of a thing.
Nice. Sounds fun. Sounds like classic urban fantasy in a lot of ways, too. Got a lot of those elements that really hit that genre right on the head, too. You know, not in a derivative way, but in a way, you know, it's just, it's recognizable, right? But I like the focus on the ritual side of things, because a lot often, you know, like what I'm familiar with from my urban fantasy readings, mostly like the Dresden Files, where he frequently is blowing stuff up. You know, it's a comic book. They're literally the Dresden Files comic books. Whereas, I mean, even though he does some of that ritual stuff, that kind of falls away as the stories go forward, and he's just like, okay, I've got a fireball, basically.
My characters have been known to use fireballs and things like that, too.
So I was wondering if that happened, too, yeah.
It does happen. It's happened as the stories have progressed a little bit. And my main character is a magician in a goth club in Vancouver. So he has lots of tricks up his sleeve, like fireballs. So he's always carrying around flash powder and stuff like that. But he has evolved into being able to do some pretty fancy firework.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I really like that, too, the of evolution from, you know, like the petty magic that we can do in the real world to, you know, actually setting stuff on fire with your mind or whatever, or your incantation.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where he's gone with it. Yeah.
Nice. So when you write urban fantasy, what kind of inspirations do you mentioned fairies and that sort of stuff, some of the classic creatures from folklore, but do you have any other major influences that you draw on when you write this kind of book?
Yes, I definitely have a few. One of my favorite urban fantasy writers is Charles DeLint, who's a Canadian writer, and I love his work, and I love his fairy work for sure. I like some of the work Kelly Armstrong's done, another Canadian writer with her series, especially Cainsville. That's a great series. And then I really work a lot with my muses. So I don't like those terms pantser and plotter.
Me
so
neither.
I just don't like it. It really rubs me the wrong way. So I prefer to say that I'm an intuitive writer and that I work with my muses. That's kind of how I roll with it. So characters are muses for me. My main character, Estrada, who's kind of rolled through 4 books now, he's one of my main muses, plus his partner. And the two of them, I spend a lot of time talking to them. You know, I can hear conversations and all that kind of stuff. I use dreams when I'm writing. And I've never plotted anything. So when I write a book, I just start writing it. And when I finish it, then I look at what happened. It's always a surprise.
No, that's great. That's a lot of what I do. I'm not quite that free, I don't think, when I write, but I do discover most of what I write. I definitely intuit a lot. And the thing I've noticed, because I actually did just finish writing a rough draft today, incidentally, before this interview. And it was really, or actually rather wrote the climax of the book. There might be some tinkering at the end, but whatever. At the epilogue. But it's this interesting kind of feeling where I'm like, wow, I really set this up it's like years ago I knew this was going to happen, and then suddenly it appeared, but I didn't know how it was going to happen until today. And it's an incredible sensation. It's one of those feelings that I kind of live for as an author, as a writer, just in general. You know, where it's like, wow, this just it all fell into place. It's like it had to be this way, but it also wasn't going to be this way just a few days ago. I actually literally had a plan where it wasn't going to be this way. And then it couldn't not be this way, though.
I know. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there. And that is one of the most thrilling parts of it for me, where I don't know what's going to happen. And I sit down and the character just takes it somewhere else. And I've had situations where somebody's died and I didn't know they were going to die. And by the end of what you're finishing writing, you're in tears going, what? You know, but I think that emotion carries forward to when the reader's reading your work, because they're feeling it really raw, just like you felt it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
no, that's powerful. That kind of, and it's something I always I've frequently forgot about it, but it happens almost every book for me lately. Mm-hmm. There's an element to it where it's like, but this was like, it's like I just found it. It's not like it was, you know, it was always there. I just found it, like kind of like how Stephen King talks about it. But also, I could have defied it. I could have written something else, like physically speaking, but it wouldn't have been right. You know, it would not have been this story. It wouldn't have been what I wanted. And and as somebody who did that, I mean, late 2019, early 2020, I wrote a book that will never see the light of day in that form, because I was writing a book, and then I'm like, oh, this is awful. I'd written 80,000 words, and I'm like, none of this works. This is a finished book that is complete garbage, and I never want to publish. And I've already published a book under that title, because I took the same characters, wrote the book again, basically. Mm. That was my second epic fantasy book in this series. But the first one was so vacant, and it was just the wrong book. And I'm like, no, this can't be it. So I went back looking for the different one. Does that sort of thing ever happen to you? Probably not on that scale, I hope. With that many words.
No, well, sort of. I mean, not on that scale. But when the last book I wrote, I actually went to Ireland and I researched it in 2017. And then I came back and I was writing. I'm like, okay, I want to write a kind of a more traditional mainstream lighthouse mystery. So I'll do that. And I had lived on a lighthouse for a while, so I had a really good setting. And I had great ideas for it. So I started writing that book, and I was 30,000 words into that book and moving along. And then one night I went to bed and I was really, really missing my main character. I had left him in a really bad place in book 3, and really bad place. And so, yeah. And I said, Estrada, where are you? What are you doing? What's happening with you? Like that, you know, out loud.
And he's like, you left me in a coma or something, or whatever you did to me. You did that horrible thing to me.
Yeah. And the next morning I woke up and I knew where he was. I could see him. I could see the whole first chapter. And I just started writing. I'm like, you're writing the wrong book. Now you have to write this book. So I just dropped the mystery, the Ghostlight mystery, and went back and I wrote the whole Irish book, which is the one that I just launched on Sunday.
Beautiful.
And and it just came really quickly, because I had done all the research a couple of years before, and it was kind of stewing. You know, sometimes things have to stew, but then once you sit down to write, it comes out of all kinds of different places.
Yeah. Like the book, the book I just finished writing, actually, or just finished the rough draft of today, was a lot like that. I mean, what you say rings so true, because I wrote the kind of end state of this book. It was in my head for 20 years, at least 10. No, more like 10 or 15, not 20. Geez, but the setting isn't that old. But when I was a senior in high school, I came up with this character, and I knew what state he was going to be in. And then I'm like, I started writing a series 10 or 12 years later. I started writing this series, and I finished it, and I finished the first couple books. I'm like, well, this is definitely before that would have happened. But now I finally reached the point where where I'm at, where that character started in my head, which is really weird. It's like, okay, so I had to create this whole story of just how he ended up this way. which is it was interesting, but I didn't know that was what I was doing, which is the other fascinating part about any part of the process. Honestly, I don't know. And do you know what you're doing in that sense, or you said it surprises you?
You know what? I just really go with it. Like, he is part of my life. Like, the characters actually come to life, and once they become like your best friends and they're with you all the time and they're talking to you, that's when they become your muses. And yeah, so I kind of never know what's going to happen. I know there's probably going to be a book 5, because at the end of the book 4, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, really?
Oh my, yeah.
And,
well, also, how can you abandon a muse? That's the other interesting thing that this is raising. You can't. Why would you too? Also, I mean, like you might try to wander away, but you'll come back if they're still there, if there's still a muse for you, right?
Yeah. Another one of my interesting muses is Peter Gabriel.
Okay.
Yeah, and because he's just so brilliant, but his voice just slays me. And so when I was writing this book is set in 200 BC Ireland, and there was a Druid bard in there, and he basically has Peter Gabriel's voice. So I had to figure out how to describe that. So I knew that he had Peter Gabriel's voice, but then I had to put that into words somehow.
That's always fascinating to try to do, like to have a reference like that, you know, like a character that you want to convey this thing that you actually understand very clearly, the voice, the look, the mannerisms, that kind of thing. And then you don't, and like, at least with me, like maybe I'm projecting a little bit here, but it's so unconscious for me when I write, like I don't know anything I'm doing in the moment. But I can look back and see exactly what came out, and I can interpret it when I'm editing. But while I'm writing, I don't know any of it. Basically, it's weird.
Yeah, we have a really similar process. That is what I often do too. So I'll write the whole book, and then I use Joseph Campbell's hero's journey a lot, so to plot structure. But I won't use it kind of till the end. And so when I'm all finished, then I'll look at the hero's journey and go, I put it on the wheel, and I can actually put it on the wheel and go, oh yeah, I just used it again, and it all fits, and all those scenes are where they're supposed to be. So that's kind of an interesting. I think Joseph Campbell's always been a muse for me as well.
Oh yeah, Campbell's
the myths.
The monomyth is extremely powerful, of course. And I've got to say, it was very interesting. If you haven't heard of her in this book, Gail Carriger has this book out called The Heroine's Journey, which explores kind of the inverse, but not quite. You know, it's like the opposite, equal and opposite of the hero's journey. Whereas in the hero's journey, the character kind of has to face the evil alone. It's that kind of thing. It's about becoming stronger in yourself. The heroine's journey is kind of more is similar, but it's more about building relationships, building family in a way. And it's a similar plot structure that goes back just about as far as the monomyth as Campbell's monomyth in mythology and stuff. But it's a little. The reason I bring it up is I wrote one of the book that used that kind of by mistake before I even knew it was a thing. It's one of those things about how, like, you know, how and like you say, you don't think about you're using the monomyth, you're using Campbell's hero's journey or whatever. You're not doing that in a way that's like I've got to hit these points. Are you?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's it. Just you can fit it in there because it fits. It's a universal or a a widely used constant in a way.
Yeah, I think it's kind of ingrained into our consciousness now, and so if you're tuned into it, then you're just going to pick it up and do it naturally, which is really a beauty thing.
Yeah,
it's magic.
Yeah, magic. Exactly. It is magic. It's the inner game of tennis. It's the Bhagavad Gita. It's all this stuff. It's how things just fit together, and it's magnificent. And it feels like a miracle, to use another term that I'm not really a big fan of. But it feels miraculous, though. Yes, it's amazing. Such a great, and it adds this feeling of it's weird because I sometimes say I feel powerful when I'm done writing. Like I feel great. Like I've written this book, it feels great. I felt like I did a good job. But it's actually kind of the opposite, at least now that I think about it, right? It's like the absence, it's like you just kind of let go and this thing happens through you, which is maybe a little bit mystical, but... And that's why I don't like the term miracles. I'm not a fan of mysticism to that degree, but it's kind of true too, because you can't...
I'm totally a mystic.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. I mean, spirituality is a huge part of everything I'm doing. I mean, whether it's Wicca or Druidry or talking to spirits, mediumship, like all of those things come through, and all the things that the witches do, I do in my life.
Oh,
Except
okay.
maybe
So
the naked running around in the woods part.
maybe not. Maybe
well,
not.
I'm not going to own up to that anyway.
Yeah. Better leave that to people's imaginations. Maybe, probably not. Probably not, people. But yeah. No, that's fascinating. I guess I didn't know that you that you did the actual witch stuff yourself, the Wiccan stuff. Sorry.
I've had my moments.
Interesting. And then obviously, so you have some firsthand knowledge of what goes into this in real life, which is awesome.
Plus, I write all the rituals.
Exactly. Yeah, the rituals. Yeah.
So when my editor says, like, sometimes I'm afraid to read your rituals out loud because I'm afraid what's going to happen.
Like that. What is that? There was the one Lovecraft character, the one Lovecraft monster or whatever, where if you said its name, it would come and eat you. It's a very Beetlejuice kind of thing, but like,
yeah,
and or like just reading it was supposed to drive people insane. I think was what it was. Just reading the name out loud. It's like, okay, so that's funny because people are reading this as a book. Like that's kind of a clever changeover, but but in that case, of course, a little bit less pleasant probably. No matter how scary your rituals are, I mean, Lovecraft's it's just a different kind of style. That mythos is its own thing, obviously.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, so when you take like you don't take your character. I mean, I almost said when you take your character and put them in a story, but how do you know? I mean, the muse tells you what the characters are saying and thinking and stuff. Do the characters tell you what the problems they're in are? What their problems tell you that this is what I'm dealing with. I need to get through this, and that kind of gives you the storyline to follow.
Yes, in a way they do. And I mean, I know them so well.
Yeah.
And so part of it is their personality drives it. The second thing is I really use a process called What Next, which and it often happens where I go to bed at night. I'm like, okay, what next? And I just leave it because, when you sleep on things, all your subconscious is working. And then I'll wake up in the morning and I'll know what's next. And then I can sit down and write it. Or I'll wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and just write it all down as I'm seeing it. And that drives the story forward a lot of the time.
Yeah, that makes me curious. Are you a morning person when you write, or are you more of a night writer?
I am a morning person.
I kind of figured that might be the case because I'm actually kind of similar in that way too. It used to be when I started writing, I was in high school. I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning to write before school, and that's how I wrote my first few books. But it was like, I've also had nightmares my entire life, pretty much, night terrors for most of my life. But then they always influence the book. I don't think my books are scary. I guess part of me must think they're scary though.
Yes, it sounds like it.
Because it sounds like some of these things that come into my head are like, oh, that's awful. Well, whatever, better type it up. But I guess my point is, I always found it easier to write in the morning. Is it the same with you, I guess, as you say?
Yeah, for sure. And the other part for me of that, in terms of biological rhythms, is I'm really quite sensitive to a lot of things, like even lights at night and things like that. So I have to have these like bedtime rituals or I'll never sleep. So if I'm writing at night, if I start writing at 8 or 9 at night, I'm going to write till 4 in the morning. I won't be able to sleep that night. So what I do is don't do it. I basically don't do it. And I say, just tell me what's going to happen in my subconscious. And then when I can sit down to the computer, because I go right to the computer most of the time, then I'll write it. Yeah. And I am just a morning person.
Yeah, I really like being up in those, not necessarily super early anymore, but I like being up before the other people in the house. I like to be able to go and do whatever I need, make my coffee and get started before anybody else is around. It really does kind of it inspires me a little bit, Before this pandemic, I would go out to the local community center as soon as it opened. Like the moment it opened, I'd be there at 6 in the morning with my computer. And I'd start typing. Just find one of the seats in the community center and just sit there and twiddle away for an hour or two before anyone else was even in the building, practically. Yeah. I can't wait for that again, but I have to.
Now, do you tend to wake up at 3 a.m, which is like the witching hour?
Well, well, no, not generally, and also I have done some. I generally got up at 4 or 5. Yeah, 3 is. I guess I don't usually wake up at 3, though. Sometimes I could swear that's when I have those nightmares about former guests of this show yelling at me, which is very funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's probably when that happens.
That 3 to 4 in the morning is a really interesting time. And, like monks and nuns get up at 3 a.m. to meditate because it's such a special magical time to connect. And I often will wake up and go, oh, let's see. And I look over and yep, it's 3:00 right on, it's, if you're lucky, you get to go back to sleep after that, but sometimes you don't. So,
well, that might make sense. I used to get up at 4, or 3:45, 4, And if I ever got, and then maybe that's the thing. Maybe because I felt like actually lately, when I've been getting up at 5 or 5:30, it's like, well, this is early, but it's not kicking me into gear like it used to. I'm not. I usually don't get much writing done at that time anymore. It usually takes maybe an hour or two to get ready, and that's so maybe I'm missing my window. Maybe I need to go back a little further. Which is, I can totally do. I mean, I don't even know where to be at night, except actually to run RPGs and stuff. But whatever, that's a different thing. Anyway, it is fascinating. The witching hour. Yeah, I always forget when forgot when that was. But it's like the hour right before morning really begins. Right, basically, it's like right the last hour of the night, practically. And that is a mystical time. I remember. I stayed up. The last book I released. I did an all-nighter to finish editing it, which doesn't sound like a great idea, but it worked out. It wasn't a great idea. I was out of time. So I just went all night, and and then I went. So I must have gone from I just sat down at 8 in the evening, and then the next morning around 11, I was done. And it was it was such a cool experience, but it's hard to put into words because I was reading this book that I dictated, so I didn't even know what it sounded like. I was cleaning up dictation all night, which and I'd done a lot of the book before, but I did a bunch of it overnight, and I don't know, it was this insane experience of wow, is this book really this good? Man, this is awesome! I just keep turning the pages. Basically, it was one of the most empowering experiences I've ever had, honestly.
Yeah, it's always exciting when you read something you've read and you go oh my God, wow, that was great.
Wait, it works. Amazing.
Did I write
Fascinating. How did that get there? Yeah.
Wow.
That's the other feeling. Do you ever have that, how did that get there? You don't really remember that line that went in there? Yeah, that's so powerful. I don't know. I'm just kind of gushing about this because I love that experience and I just had it too, obviously.
Yes.
But so obviously your books have some murder and stuff and there's some dark stuff. But
lots of dark stuff.
Lots of dark stuff. Okay. Yeah. And don't be fooled by those covers, folks. Those covers are bright, but the books they've got some dark moments, I'm sure.
Well, the covers, the covers are all tattoos.
Ah.
I don't know if you noticed that.
I didn't notice that. Okay.
Okay, so they are. So these are the tattoo editions. So when we created them, we actually decided to do the white background with the tattoo really standing out. And so each of the tattoos are worn by characters in that book.
Oh, they're very striking covers. And I say that as a part-time cover designer myself. I really like them, but I didn't really I didn't understand what they were. Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what they are. And I just at the launch we just did, I did a little interview with the cover designer, and we talked about our process doing them. So it was really neat. So the one the latest one with it, which is this one, I don't know if you can see it this is actually the butterfly with a fairy in it. And this is what the archaeologist wears on the back of her neck. And then Estrada, who's the main character, he's the one that has the angel wings that go right from his shoulders down to his glutes. What happens when they end up in 200 BC Ireland is they're wearing these tattoos. Makes it really interesting.
Yeah, because
they didn't have tattoos.
Exactly, that's what I was getting at. Yeah, because they would at least have very different technology for it. I wasn't sure I didn't realize they didn't have them at all. That's even more crazy for the people there.
I don't think they did.
That mean people would think they were kind of supernatural because how'd you get that on your skin? Yeah.
they immediately think they're fairies.
Right. That makes sense.
But because the Druids at that time were so much into mythology and the old stories about fairies, they're not really, they want is the power more than anything. They're not freaked out by it. They're like, oh, we got fairies here. Like, what do they want? And why are they here? And,
right. It's not like, these guys are crazy, we should be afraid of them. It's more like, what can we get from them, almost?
Yeah. Yeah. So it really affects the relationships in the story in an interesting way.
Yeah. No, that sounds like it could get very deep very fast, actually, especially with the time travel element as well.
And then, of course, she shows up in the middle of a cattle raid out of nowhere. So that the Iron Age druid finds her. So he thinks, of course she's a fairy. She just showed up out of nowhere.
It's popped into time travel. Popped in from the other world. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. Time travel is a mind-boggling concept too.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those concepts, time travel specifically, though, is one of those concepts that's so difficult to do in a way that's consistent, especially over a short time frame, like Back to the Future kind of thing, where you could actually be going back to the time period where you know the people personally. But then there's also, but the more distant time travel, like sounds like what's in your books, is that then you have this other element of it's a foreign country. It's a totally different place and time. And you won't, and the characters even understanding each other it can be a problem sometimes, with the languages and stuff. I mean, like you go back to Middle English, and it's like, oh, well, I don't speak that. I speak, modern English,
No, for sure. They were sent there by Cernunnos, the horned god. So he did a little bit of a glamour and made sure that they could understand what was going on, that they could speak the language, that they were dressed appropriately and whatnot, because he likes to play with humans. So he kind of sent them back as a little bit of entertainment for himself.
God. Oh, those gods, those pesky gods.
Oh,
what will they go up to next? Time travel.
Yeah.
Well, it's been awesome talking to you, Wendy. Where can people find your work and your stuff on the internet or wherever, where can people find your stuff? I guess you should stop there.
A good place to find me is at my website, for starters, which is bluehavenpress.com. And from there, you can pretty much find me everywhere. I mean, my books are in all the major retailers.
Well, excellent. Thanks for being on the show, Wendy. It's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Thank you. And I'm gonna look up your books and see what I can find.
Well, wonderful. Yeah. As for this podcast, I was about to do my plugs, because as for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellularpublications.com. You can find my fantasy books on Amazon.com. That would be Demon Scroll is the first in the Demon Hunter series, and that's epic fantasy despite the series title, folks. So don't worry, this is a secondary world where you will get sucked in. Honestly, there are demons afoot. Demons run the show, by the way, as well. But they're everywhere. And there's an immortal guy who hunts them. That's basically what those books are about. And I talked a bunch about them today, actually. Those are most of the books I referred to today were from that series. But you can, and the third one's coming out on Easter Sunday this year. Kind of a fortuitous time.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's just on April 4th. Yeah, it should be out. And I just finished it just recently. So I'm very thrilled. And I'm thrilled that I'm going to meet my pre-order deadline.
It is so exciting when you finally get that book in your hand, isn't it?
It's so close. Yeah. I'm an indie author. I don't know. We didn't get too much of the business side, but I really thought. But so my pre-order deadline is the end of the month. It's the end of March, and I'm barely done editing in time. So yeah, I'm just like that was. It's been down to the wire. But definitely check that book out, folks. That book should be out actually pretty close to it. Yeah, just a few days after this podcast drops. So, take a look at all that stuff. And you can, of course, the podcast, mentalcellularpublications.com. Find us wherever podcasts are downloaded. And thanks for listening, folks. It's been fun. And stay safe, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
That tears it.